just so folks aren't disappointed, we aren't going to be talking about Sandy Hook, are we?
No. And I think, like you said, there's so many people out there that have done a great job. My philosophy on that is right now that we looked at that in its initial phases, and we were able to identify so many inconsistencies that are independent of each other that at this point I don't think it really is worth it to pay more attention to it than we have, because, like you said, there's so many people out there doing a great job. But we already know what this was. The more time that goes by, the more stuff people pull out of it. And the thing that I'm really concerned about at this point, Sean, is if they don't get the mileage that they want out of it, and this campaign by Obama is not going well, what are they going to unleash for us next? How severe and how brutal will the next staged event be if they can't get what they want? That's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, I'm concerned about that too. More false flags. They can pull out another false flag just about any time they choose. But the one thing working against them, Mark, as you know and I know and everybody who's awake now knows, is we're all looking for them. You know,
yeah.
they can't pull these things off as easily as they pulled off 9/11 anymore, because people will wake up day one. We know that Sandy Hook was, at least on some level, a false flag operation. You and I have established that well, and now many other great researchers are going down that rabbit hole and really flushing it out.
So I think we need to move on and focus on why this is being done and focus on that fight.
Yeah, and Gun Owners of America and, of course, the NRA is going to try to be around every corner. Same with Oath Keepers. We've got a lot of good people who are standing up for truth, standing up for honor, and saying this is our line in the sand. I interviewed Pastor Chuck Baldwin recently, who has stated that this is the issue for which he is willing to become an outlaw. And you'll recall that Chuck Baldwin ran for president of the Constitution Party back in 2008. So this is not a man whose intellect can be trifled with. And for so many of us, this is the line in the sand, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I had listened to that interview. I thought it was a great interview. And I think the things that he said echoes a lot of the beliefs that you see in honest, law-abiding American patriots who basically feel the same way and feel that, they're only going to go so far before they allow their rights to be trampled and before they allow themselves for the hostile state that they're in to make a criminal out of them.
There was a really inspirational video I posted at SGT Report, and it was filmed in Buffalo at a question and answer forum about New York State's gun ban. And some really, really great patriots who were very profound stood up to speak openly. And one of them said, "Are you going to build more prisons? Are you going to build more courtrooms? How are you going to prosecute those of us who say this is unconstitutional? How are you going to prosecute and handle those of us who say, no, this is our line in the sand?" It was just very inspirational because so many men were there, young, old, veterans, non-veterans were there to speak up and stand up against this tyranny, because this is our last chance. Either we speak up now or they take our guns, they take our freedom, and it's a slippery slope into absolute despotism.
I agree with you, Sean, and I did see the video, and I think whoever put that together did a great job. But I want to make one comment about that video. Anybody that's seen that video or anything like it needs to observe the people from the state of New York who were there to basically outline what was going on. And when you look at these people, these elected officials, they're standing there with their arms folded, and they look at the people with pure contempt. And they have no care as to what those people are saying and expressing. And you could even see that in the video where they said, hey, we're just here to tell you what the law is. This is already passed. And the thing that I would like to recommend to people is when you go to something like this, you should use that opportunity to talk to people who are like-minded individuals as much as you should to communicate with the people that we already mentioned that are there from the state. In other words, they don't care what you have to say, and it's obvious they don't care. But you can use that as an opportunity to link up with and talk to like-minded individuals, people who feel the way you feel. That's what we need to turn these things into. In other words, we're almost those people need to take the mic and turn it back on the crowd versus addressing a bunch of people who don't even care what we have to say.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. What was terrific, too, is one of them told those officials standing at the front of the room, you need to take back to the legislators and the politicians that you failed, that they made a mistake, that this needs to be repealed as soon as possible. And that's the message that New York needs to send, because it is unenforceable if everybody stands up and says, no, you're not taking my guns, you're not taking my magazines, I'm not going to comply with this unconstitutional law, period. Line in the sand.
I agree.
So, Mark, you're our contact who is knee-deep in the firearms manufacturing and sales industry all day long, every day. Why don't you tell us about current demand? What are you seeing?
Well, basically right now there is a very strong demand for firearms and ammunition across the board, but it's almost historic. But this demand is being overinflated due to the speculation by both distributors and dealers in the industry. Much of the industry's manufacturing capacity for 2013 is already sold out, and dealers and distributors are ordering 2 to 3 times their normal sales volume. But I want to give people just a brief explanation of how the industry works in terms of sales and distribution so they can understand. The way things are set up is the majority of the manufacturers, the large and medium-sized manufacturers in the country, they don't sell direct to dealers. Some of them do. Some of them have a hybrid sales and distribution mechanism, but the bottom line is the main way that sales and distribution take place in the domestic firearms industry is that manufacturers sell to wholesale distribution. There's probably about 20 major distributors in the United States. And these wholesale distributors sell to dealers, retail FFL holders, gun shops. And then those dealers sell to consumers, okay? So what you see is the wholesale distributors and the dealers clamoring to satisfy demand, and in a lot of cases, their shelves are pretty bare. And there's a fever that exists right now in the industry, and everybody's trying to scramble to get product to meet demand. That's why you see prices skyrocketing for ammunition and firearms, where a $699 retail AR-15 that was $700 in December was $1,400 today. So that's where you're seeing. That's why you're seeing that happen. And what I want to explain to people is that firearms manufacturers are not raising prices as the result of the panic purchasing that's going on across the country. The dealer base is completely to blame for that. So if you walk into a gun shop somewhere and they tell you, hey, this rifle's $1,400, and you look online and the manufacturer's suggested MSRP is $699, the manufacturer did not double its prices. That's happening at the retail level. What I want to explain to people here is that now is not the time to buy. If you're a gun guy and you've got 2 or 3 rifles and some ammunition put away, you're going to pay more than you should for stuff right now, including ammunition. And if you have nothing, then I understand why you may feel compelled to buy, and I'm not saying that that's a bad decision. But if you're a guy who's got more than enough of what you need, it's probably not the best time to buy anything right now unless you absolutely positively have to.
Okay, so to a large degree, it sounds like the dealers are doing some gouging. Of course, it is a question of supply and demand, and right now demand is really, I think, at an all-time high. So before we move on, Mark, with what's happening with law enforcement and military in response to this anti-gun fever created by Obama, I know that you're very excited about what you're seeing. Why don't you, before we move on to that, why don't we let you finish up your other point?
Yeah, well, the bottom line is this, Sean, is that semi-auto military-style rifles make up a tiny fraction of the overall amount of firearms in national circulation. We do not have an excess of weapons of this type. If anything, we have a shortage of these type of weapons. So getting on to what's happening with law enforcement and military response to the anti-gun fever created by Obama, you and I both have seen over the last few weeks that law enforcement all over the country is waking up and turning their backs on Obama and the unconstitutional threats against the Second Amendment. We've seen a lot of sheriffs and law enforcement agencies publicly state that they're not going to do anything to infringe on anybody's Second Amendment rights, and they have no plans to enforce any laws, or they're basically putting it out there in the public domain that if they're asked to do anything which violates people's Second Amendment rights, that they're not going to play ball with that. And that's happening all over the country.
Well, that is the good news. I think people are waking up, and even if they don't know exactly why Obama is doing this, and I think it's because this government has pretty much promised land and resources to China, and as you know, the Chinese government has recently called for the disarming of the United States population. So I think if you're for the disarming of U.S. citizens, then you're with China. You can say you're with Obama, but you're really with communist China.
Well, more and more agencies across the United States are looking for cooperation from their citizens to help police and protect their communities, is because they admit that they can't protect the public at large from random acts of violence. And you see that in places like Detroit, places like Wisconsin, places like California, where law enforcement has said, hey, look, we can't be there with a phone call, but our advice to you is to lock your door and load your gun. That's very telling, and I think it's almost unprecedented that you would have law enforcement, and many times where you have people who are sheriffs and stuff like that are elected officials, say something like that in the public domain. That's unprecedented.
Yeah, it's very exciting. We saw that from the Milwaukee area sheriff came out and told citizens to arm themselves. And he said, we're partners in this thing. I can't do this by myself. You defend yourself, and then you wait for us to come after you call us. But the first thing you need to do is defend yourself. It's very inspiring. We see guys like Stuart Rhodes, who I've mentioned time and time again, the founder of Oath Keepers, somebody who puts the Constitution first, started a group called Oath Keepers before all of this happened, going back 5, 6, 7, 8 years, trying to teach men and women who have taken an oath to defend the Constitution against enemies, both foreign and domestic, what that means and why they should take it seriously. And now you've got that organization in place to help welcome with open arms all of these newly awakening men and women in law enforcement and military. And it's just so inspirational. As I've told people time and time again, each and every one of us can make a difference each and every day. Start a blog, speak out, call your senators, call your congressmen, write letters, do it. Get involved, Mark. And I think that's really a underscore highlight to our call here.
Yeah, I agree. And, for the sake of time, I want to move on to another point that I wanted to discuss with you. And you had just mentioned something. We need to talk amongst ourselves as gun owners about what a responsible gun owner is. And there have been a lot of people out there in the fight that have done a lot of good things. But unfortunately, as well as I do, sometimes the people that complain the loudest are the ones that do the least. And just a few talking points here, in my opinion, that I think being a responsible gun owner, you have to become proactive about proper storage of firearms. What can you do to help the cause? Lock up your guns. Don't be part of the statistic. You've heard me say this on different interviews with you, and you've heard me write about it on your site. You have to lock up your guns. You shouldn't wait to be told that you have to do something like this because it's the law. If every gun owner had a safe or was locking up their guns properly and they didn't contribute to an accident or get stolen or anything like that, we would be dealing with a lot less statistical nonsense to begin with. Another thing is that, like you mentioned, people have to start getting vocal. You have to start hounding the people who are creating the problems for us and letting them know, make them uncomfortable, write letters, send emails, go to events in your area. And even more importantly, in my opinion, is take the fight for gun rights to your own home state. The law matters most where you live. And, it's great that we have people that are looking at this from a national perspective, but the NRA is not really involved in the fight for states' gun rights. A perfect example of this is the state of Illinois. If it wasn't for the Illinois State Rifle Association and the tireless work that people from that organization and its members do, Illinois would have even more strict gun legislation than New York and California. The NRA is not really involved there, and my point is spend your money and effort where it matters most, which is in your own backyard, okay? And the other thing that is related to that is gun owners need to start being conscious of the image that they portray as a gun owner, and when you go to these events and when you write letters and you do things like that, you have to remember, as a group, we're going to be judged by what we say, how we act, and how we look. And if you want to be part of the fight in the public domain, I think you would be doing all gun owners a service by being conscious that you're not playing into the media stereotypes of what gun owners are, because the media is always watching, and they will seize on every opportunity we give them, and it's a lot more difficult for the media to manipulate our efforts if we look and act professional. And then, the last thing is understand who you're dealing with. The people in this country who are opposed to any type of private firearms ownership or ownership of semi-automatic rifles, these people make up a significant part of our population. And as a gun owner, you should understand that these people are discussing these issues from a completely uninformed, uneducated opinion that's usually based on fear and emotion. The vast majority of these people have never had any technical or practical experience with firearms whatsoever. Some of these people have never even shot so much as a BB gun, but they're going to tell you what we should be doing. People into this category, they buy into all the government and mainstream manipulated data and manipulated statistics and the propaganda and the anti-gun agenda. And you have to understand, as a gun owner, that one problem that we face is that many of the anti-gun proponents, they view this issue from a utopian pipe dream where, their vision is of a world where guns and violence don't exist, and that's not reality. So how do you debate or talk to someone that's not living in reality? You and I both know, Sean, that there's never going to be zero deaths in this country from firearms. The same way there'll never be zero fatalities in vehicular-related accidents, or there'll never be zero unemployment no matter how good of an economy we have. So, how do you debate somebody that's living in a fantasy land? There was plenty of war, death, and destruction before firearms ever existed, and the guys with common sense, we all know that, but you still have to understand who you're dealing with.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And the bottom line is, government is there to protect our liberties, not take it away. Government can't create jobs. It can only steal from the productive and give to the unproductive. And in this case, all they can do is take liberty from law-abiding Americans, turn law-abiding Americans into criminals, and turn every American city into Chicago. And if they were intellectually honest about the debate, they would admit that. They're not, because they're enemies of the Constitution. Mark, I sure do appreciate your time. It's always a real pleasure to talk with you.
You too, Sean, and I'll be continuing to write for your website, and I want to thank you for everything that you're doing. And if anybody does want to email me directly, you can email me at Mark, M-A-R-K-S, M-A-N-N, the number 4, and the word truth, Mark S. Mann, the number 4, truth at yahoo.com.
Mark S. Mann for truth at yahoo.com. I like it. I didn't know about that email address. All right, very good, Mark. Thanks, man.
Okay, Sean, thanks.
All right, buddy. Bye-bye. Okay, guys, thanks for joining us, and thanks for supporting SGT Report. Thanks for tuning in. Good night.